Have you ever imagined being in the middle of a dense forest, surrounded by the piercing silence of the night, when, suddenly, something unexpected appears in front of you? Now imagine that this something is not just anything, but rather a lost bear cub, disoriented, with little eyes full of fear and not knowing where to go. The biting cold intensifies, and he is not alone, because right in front of him, a mysterious dog. He walks determinedly, as if he knew exactly what to do. Sounds like a movie story, doesn't it? But what happened next was so unbelievable that no one would believe if there were no witnesses. This fragile and vulnerable little bear was thrown into a desperate fight for survival, facing the unknown, the cold, and the imminent risk of being devoured by nocturnal predators. But for some reason he trusted this dog, as if that strange guide could take him to a safe destination. The question is, where was this dog taking the puppy? What is the outcome of this story? Was the bear's mother still alive and waiting for him, or was this little being doomed to face the world alone? And, above all, how did a simple dog change everything on this journey? What happens next will leave you speechless. In the freezing waste of Alaska, where wildlife fights daily battles against the merciless cold and the white expanse hides secrets untouched by man, something extraordinary has happened. The biting wind whistled through the gnarled trees, scattering snowflakes across the stone-hard ground. Brown bears, true giants of the region, know these lands like no one else. Every step they take is calculated. Every decision is a matter of survival. But what about when a defenseless cub finds himself alone, lost in this icy desert, without the protection of his mother? That's exactly what happened that night. A cub, too small to survive alone, wandered aimlessly, his fur covered in ice crystals, his snout heaving as he tried to catch any familiar scent. But all he found was the cold, the loneliness, the danger. His mother, an experienced brown bear, had disappeared without a trace. Perhaps it had been driven away by a group of predators. Maybe she was injured. Maybe he would never come back. What matters is that he was alone. And in that inhospitable region, where wolves lurk in the darkness and hunger is an implacable enemy, a puppy without protection doesn't have many chances. Every minute away from his mother increased his risk of freezing to death, being hunted, or simply succumbing to exhaustion. His instinct told him to keep walking, look for shelter, look for food, but he was too young to know where to go. And it was at that moment, in this desolate scenario, that something unexpected happened. A dog. In the middle of nowhere, without warning, a lone dog crossed his path. With thick fur and attentive eyes, he looked like he belonged to someone, perhaps a resident of a nearby village, perhaps a sled dog that got lost. But what was most impressive was his behavior. Instead of running away, growling, or attacking, he simply looked at the bear cub, sniffed the air, and began to walk, not on the run, but as if it had a destiny, as if he knew exactly where he was going. And the cub, with no other choice, followed him. This moment may seem small, but it represents something huge. In the wild, instincts are everything. A bear would never follow a dog. Dogs would normally avoid bears. But somehow these two found themselves there, in the middle of the white expanse, as if their destinies were crossed. As if, in some inexplicable way, that dog knew that the little bear needed help. But the question remains, where was he taking the cub? Did the dog know what he was doing, or was it all just a coincidence? Would the cub have any chance of finding his mother again? Or would this journey only take him further away from her? And most importantly, what would happen if they came across another predator along the way? If you are already involved in this story and want to know what happened next, write here in the comments, "I want." Your engagement helps spread amazing stories like this. The little bear hesitated for a moment. His fragile body was shaking, not only from the biting cold that was infiltrating his dense skin, but also from the extreme tiredness that was beginning to overwhelm him. The snow beneath his paws was cruelly cold, sucking the heat from his body with each step. His muscles were stiff, his eyes tired and heavy, but there was something inside him that still fought. a primal survival instinct that forced him to keep going, to keep moving. He couldn't stop. Stopping meant giving up, and giving up meant dying. And it was at that moment, when everything seemed lost, that he saw the dog again. The animal walked with determination, sniffing the cold air as if following an invisible trail. He didn't look lost. He knew where he was going. The cub didn't understand, but he felt something inexplicable. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was just despair, and, even without strength, he forced his numb paws to move forward. Night was falling quickly, and with it came the true dangers of that wild land. In Alaska, when the sun goes down, the forest changes. The sounds become deeper, more threatening. The distant howl of wolves echoed through the trees, a reminder that the cub was not alone in that hostile territory. There were hungry predators nearby, and a small, weak, defenseless bear was the perfect target. If he stayed still for too long, he would have no chance at all. But the puppy didn't stop. He crossed the snow with steady steps, his ears always alert for the slightest sign of danger. The bear cub, no matter how small, still carried the weight of the wild instinct within him. Even alone, even young, his body already knew how to react to imminent danger. He might not have his mother by his side, but he could feel the threat around him. His eyes widened as he heard the sound of branches breaking behind him. His heart sped up. Something was following them. His instincts were screaming at him to run, to get away from there as quickly as possible. But his legs could barely support his own weight. The dog, however, noticed. He stopped abruptly, his paws sinking into the snow, and turned toward the sound. His snout twitched in a low growl, his body tensed. He knew. They were not alone. The bear cub looked at his strange companion, and for the first time, realized something he had not yet fully understood. That dog wasn't just a guide. He was a protector. Even for no apparent reason, without blood ties, without a logical reason, that animal had allowed him to follow him. He hadn't abandoned him. And now, upon hearing the ominous sound in the dark, he stood in front of the little bear, as if to say, "I'll handle it." But what was lurking in the shadows was no ordinary enemy. The thick smell in the air indicated something big, something dangerous. The cub didn't know, but at that moment he and the dog were about to face the biggest challenge of their lives. If you want to know who was following them and what happened next, write in the comments. It's close. This helps spread this incredible story to more people. The bear cub felt his heart beating quickly inside his chest, like a warning drum echoing across the icy expanse. Whatever was there, hidden in the shadows between the twisted trees, it was not a friend. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know where to run. His mother was always by his side, guiding his every step, protecting him from the invisible dangers of the forest. But now, he was alone. At least, that's what I thought, until I looked at the dog once again. The animal showed no fear. His eyes were fixed in the dark, attentive, but there was no hesitation in his posture. He knew they were being followed, but he didn't run away. On the contrary, it seemed to defy whatever was there, ready to protect them if necessary. The bear cub didn't understand that behavior. In the jungle, the rules are clear. The weak are left behind. But that dog, he was different. Without warning, the dog stepped forward, sniffing the icy wind. The cub felt his instinct pulling him back, an almost irresistible desire to hide, to retreat to the non-existent safety he sought so much. But something inside him hesitated. Did the dog know what it was doing? Were you taking him to a safe haven? Or were you just walking towards the unknown, without a clear destination? The choice seemed impossible. Staying there meant facing the unknown danger that moved in the darkness. But following the cub, following a stranger, was also a risk. After all, wolves hunted in packs. Bears learn from an early age to distrust anything other than their own family. But at that moment, faced with the cold that punished his paws, the hunger that weakened him, and the fear that tightened his chest, the little bear made the only decision he had left. He followed the cub. Every step was uncertain. The thick snow made it difficult for him to move. His short paws sank into the thick layer of ice, and with each new gust of wind, He felt the force of the cold trying to knock him down, but the dog remained firm. He didn't look back. He didn't hesitate. He just walked, as if he had a clear purpose, as if he was taking the cub to a place where he could be safe. And then, a sound broke the silence. The cub stopped abruptly, his heart racing, his ears alert. A rustle in the trees. Something moved around them. The puppy looked at the dog, waiting for a reaction, but the animal just continued on, as if it knew that stopping would mean becoming easy prey. The cub wanted to run, to cower behind a rock and wait for the danger to pass. But the only thing I could really do was keep following that dog. The snow began to fall more heavily, the thick flakes falling from the sky like a white curtain, making it difficult to see. More and more, the world around him disappeared, swallowed by the gathering storm. The pup tried to sniff the air, looking for any clue as to where they were, but all he could smell was the ice and the wet fur of the dog in front of him. For a moment, a cruel doubt settled in his mind. Was he doing the right thing? Was following that dog really his best option? Or was he just moving further away from his mother, heading straight into a trap towards an even crueler fate? But then, something unexpected happened. In the midst of that relentless storm, the dog stopped. For the first time since they started walking together, he looked directly at the cub. His eyes conveyed something that the little bear couldn't fully understand. But one thing was certain. He was not alone. And there, between the snow that fell increasingly heavily and the danger that still lurked in the darkness, the cub realized that there was no turning back. His destiny was now linked to that of that mysterious dog. But what awaited them ahead? Where were they going? If you are as involved in this journey as I am, comment here. Your comment helps move this story forward and reach more people. The cold wind howled through the dense forest, carrying with it the weight of the night that was beginning to dissipate. The storm had lost strength, but the trail of thick snow covered everything like a silent white blanket. The bear cub could no longer feel his paws properly, his small body still shaking with exhaustion. The only thing that kept him moving was the constant presence of the dog, his only reference in that white and unknown immensity. The walk seemed endless. Every step was a challenge, every gust of wind a new obstacle. The cub didn't know how long they had been walking, but something inside him told him they were getting closer to somewhere. The smell around him began to change. The smell of the forest, once pure and wild, now brought strange, unknown notes. Wood, smoke, humans. The dog seemed to know exactly where he was going. His posture remained firm, his gait determined. He knew the territory and seemed determined to take them to a destination the cub could not even imagine. But was that place safe? The surrounding landscape began to change. The trees gave way to a clearing, and right in the middle of it, a small wooden cabin stood, partially covered by snow. Near the house, a pile of firewood was neatly stacked, and a thin spiral of smoke rose from the chimney, indicating that someone was inside. The cub sped off, wagging its tail as if it knew it had finally arrived home. Inside the cabin, Peter finished adding more wood to the fireplace, trying to ward off the cold that insisted on invading the room. He had lived there for years, isolated in the Alaskan wilderness, in a solitary life of his own choosing. Silence and the wild immensity had become his only companions. Besides Nanook, his faithful dog, who had disappeared the night before, probably following some trail in the snow. Peter sighed, wondering where the dog could be. But before he could get up to look for him, he heard something that made him freeze for a moment. The familiar sound of paws on the wood of the porch. He turned around quickly, feeling immediate relief when he saw Nanook returning. But what happened next was something Peter could never have predicted. Nanook was not alone. Behind him, hesitant but determined, a small bear cub emerged from the snow, its fur covered in ice and its eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Peter blinked a few times, trying to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. A dog and a bear cub. His heart raced. He had seen a lot of things living in that forest, but this was different. He stood up slowly, not wanting to scare the small animal. The puppy in turn backed away a little, still unsure about that new presence. His eyes darted from side to side, trying to understand where he was and whether that human was a threat. Peter knew what it meant to see a bear cub alone. He shouldn't be there. Cubs never stray from their mothers unless something very wrong has happened. What if his mother was around? The risk was enormous. A mother bear who feels her cub is threatened could become the most dangerous creature in the forest. But there was something even more intriguing. Why had Nanook brought that cub here? Dogs don't usually act like this. They typically avoid predators, especially hatchlings that sooner or later will grow up to be large and dangerous. But Nanook didn't seem bothered. On the contrary, it seemed protector, as if that little creature was part of his pack. What had happened that night? What made Nanook take in a bear cub and bring him home, as if he knew he would be safe there? Peter's head was spinning with questions, but one thing was certain. That story was far from over. The cub was there now, in front of him, shivering from the cold and clearly exhausted. He needed to make a decision. But which one? And you, what would you do if you saw a bear cub alone on your doorstep? Comment below. I would help. Or, this is very dangerous, and let's find out together what happens next. He remained motionless for a few moments, analyzing the scene in front of him. Nanook, his faithful companion, seemed completely at ease, as if bringing a bear cub going home was completely normal. But Peter knew better. On the contrary, that was something potentially dangerous. His heart was pounding, and his mind was spinning with unanswered questions. What should I do? He couldn't just ignore the fact that a brown bear, even as a puppy, was a wild animal. And worse, if he was there alone, where was your mother? The man looked around, feeling a shiver run down his spine. If Mother were still alive, she certainly wouldn't have abandoned her puppy of her own free will. She could be injured, or much worse. But if it were alive and nearby, it wouldn't take long for it to appear. A mother bear searching for her cub may become extremely aggressive, and any sign of threat to the little one could turn that meeting into a situation of pure chaos and danger. Peter swallowed hard. He had heard stories of bear attacks on hunters, travelers, and even locals. The strength of an adult brown bear, it was enormous, capable of felling young trees with a simple blow of its paw. And if his mother had been nearby, already sniffing out his trail, he would have had very little time to react. His gaze returned to the cub. The little one was shaking from the cold, his fur covered in snow and his brown eyes reflecting a mix of fear and curiosity. He didn't look like a predator. On the contrary, he was just a baby, vulnerable, lost, in need of help. But helping a bear cub could mean sealing your own fate. He clenched his fists, feeling his breathing heavy. What to do? If he chased him away, he could be condemning the little one to certain death. The cold was cruel, and an alone cub wouldn't survive long without its mother. Hunger, cold, and predators would make him an easy target. But at the same time, keeping him there was take a huge risk. If the mother wasn't dead, she could appear at any moment and, upon smelling the human, could attack before Peter even had time to react. He looked at Nanook, waiting for some kind of answer. The dog remained beside the puppy, his expression serene, as if he had already made the decision for him, as if he knew there was no other choice. Peter sighed deeply. His mind fought against his heart. Reason said to send him away, but instinct, empathy, said something else. Leaving the cub to die alone was something he simply couldn't do. He looked back at the forest. The tree branches creaked in the freezing wind. The thick snow covered any trace of footprints that might indicate whether the mother was nearby. Everything seemed too calm, but the silence in the jungle never, it was a good sign. And then the cub, as if sensing Peter's hesitation, took a small step forward. His gaze met the man's, and in that moment, something changed. There was a silent plea there, something words could never describe. The little animal who should see Peter as a threat, I didn't try to escape. That was the moment of decision. But was Peter prepared to face the consequences of whatever came next? If you were in his shoes, what would you do? Write in the comments. I would help the cub, or this is too risky, and keep following this story. Peter. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision on his back. His instinct told him this was crazy, that a bear cub didn't belong there, that every second he spent near that creature could spell disaster. But at the same time, how could he just close his eyes and ignore it? That small being, fragile and defenseless, was before him, shivering with cold and hunger, and for some inexplicable reason, didn't show fear. Most bear cubs, when faced with a human, would panic. He would try to run, hide, or at least stay as far away as possible. But not that one. On the contrary, his curious eyes seemed to search for some answer in Peter's eyes, as if he knew this man had something he needed. The dog, Nanook, remained by the little bear's side the entire time. His relaxed body indicated that he saw no danger there, and this left Peter even more confused. Why was your dog so instinctive and used to detecting threats, so calm when faced with an animal that, in the future, could become a deadly predator? Nanook, however, seemed to think differently. As if somehow he understood that that cub wasn't just a bear. He was something more, something that needed help. Peter looked around once more. The forest was still silent, but he knew that didn't mean safety. Still, he made a decision. If that cub was there, and if its mother didn't show up, he couldn't just ignore it, at least for now. He bent down slowly, trying not to appear threatening. His heart pounded as he reached out his hand, feeling the little bear's rapid breathing. The cub remained still for a moment, hesitant. His eyes shone in the dim morning light, reflecting a mix of uncertainty and hope. And then, something unbelievable happened. The little one took a step forward. Peter held his breath. The puppy closed the distance between them, approaching slowly as if testing its own limits. Then, with a gesture that left Peter completely surprised, he lowered his head and placed his nose against the man's hand. It was a brief but powerful moment. The cold, wet touch of his nose was delicate, hesitant. And yet there he was, a wild bear cub, alone, voluntarily approaching a human. Nanook wagged his tail, as if approving of that interaction. Peter, on the other hand, was paralyzed. He didn't expect that. He didn't expect the cub to trust him. Hunger, the cold, and the survival instinct spoke louder. The little one was desperate, and perhaps he knew that this was his only chance. Peter realized he had no choice. If action was to be taken, it would have to be now. He got up and, with careful steps, entered the hut. He picked up a piece of dried fish that he had saved for Nanook and returned to the door, crouching down again. The cub immediately raised its nose, sniffing the air. His instincts alerted him to the smell of food. Peter. He held out the fish towards the little one. The cub hesitated, but the smell was irresistible. With trembling paws, he took another step forward, opened his small, sharp mouth, and carefully took the food from the man's hand. Peter watched, still in disbelief, as the puppy slowly chewed. It was obvious that he was hungry, but still he didn't show desperation. He ate calmly, as if he was still processing everything around him, as if understanding that help, coming from a human being, it was something he never imagined he would receive. Nanook sat next to the little one, watching him patiently, as if he already accepted him as part of the house. Peter rubbed his face, trying to understand what had just happened. What did that mean? Was the puppy really alone? Could he survive there any longer? And above all, was his mother still around? If this scene moved you as much as it did me, comment here. The puppy trusts. And let's continue following this incredible story together. Night fell over Peter's cabin, bringing with it a heavy silence broken only by the crackling of wood in the fireplace and the distant sound of the wind cutting through the snow-covered trees. Inside the small shelter, the bear cub slept huddled in a corner, his breathing slow and deep, exhausted after so much cold and hunger. Nanook remained nearby, lying next to the small animal, as if he were standing guard, ensuring that nothing happened to him. Peter, sitting in his wooden chair, couldn't sleep. His eyes were fixed on the cub, his mind spinning with conflicting thoughts. What would he do now? Leaving the puppy there forever was not an option. He was not a domestic animal. He could not be raised like Nanook. It was a brown bear, wild, instinctive, strong, and sooner or later he would grow up. But leaving him to his fate and simply shooing him away into the forest didn't seem right either. Alone, he wouldn't have much of a chance. And then there was the other big dilemma. Where was your mother? That forest was vast, full of dangers, but it was also bear country. Peter knew that if his mother were alive, she would still be looking for his cub. What if she was nearby? What if she smelled him there and decided to come after him? These thoughts kept pounding in his mind until, exhausted, he closed his eyes for a few moments. When he woke up, the dim light of dawn had already invaded the hut, and Nanook was still in the same place, attentive. The cub, however, was already awake. He didn't whimper, nor did he seem scared. On the contrary, he was standing sniffing the air, restless as if he had sensed something different. Peter. He frowned and stood up slowly. The cub took a few tentative steps towards the cabin door and then looked at him, as if trying to say something. He wanted out. The man took a deep breath. Would it be now? Would his mother be around? He couldn't ignore this possibility. He picked up his thick coat, slowly opened the door and took a step outside, feeling the cold wind touch his face. The cub followed behind him, more excited, more agile than the night before. And then, suddenly, a sound. Something that broke the silence of the morning. A low, distant growl. A sound filled with urgency, echoing through the snow-covered trees. The cub stopped immediately, his eyes widened and his breathing quickened. He recognized that sound. The forest, which until then seemed empty, gained a new weight. There was something there. Someone there. Peter. He remained motionless, his heart racing. He knew exactly what that meant. His mother was alive. The cub took a few steps forward, stopping at the edge of the clearing. His ears were alert, his body vibrated with anticipation. And then, as if the universe had responded to his call, the sound repeated. Closer, stronger, more real. And suddenly the imposing figure of an adult brown bear appeared among the trees. She was big, much bigger than Peter expected. His thick fur was covered in snow, and his wild eyes examined every detail around him. She sniffed the air restlessly, moving her head from side to side. She was looking. She was there for him. The cub didn't hesitate. In a single instant he shot towards her, crossing the snow with agility, running like I've never run before. Peter felt a lump in his throat as he watched him leave, without looking back. He knew where he belonged. He knew his mother was alive. The bear, noticing the little one, stood up slightly on her hind legs, letting out a new growl. This time softer, more emotionally charged. And then, when the cub finally reached her, the mother lowered her head and placed her nose against him, as if she was checking if he was really there. If he was real. If he was whole. Peter let out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding. He did it. He survived. Nanook approached his owner and sat down next to him, silently observing the scene. The dog somehow seemed to understand everything that had just happened. He looked at Peter for a moment, and then at the bears in the forest, as if he knew this was the ending that needed to happen. The bear remained there for a few seconds, sniffing the cub, as if trying to absorb everything. Then, as if nothing more needed to be said, she turned and started walking back into the forest, with the cub following closely behind, its little paws sinking into the soft snow. Peter remained still, just watching, feeling something grow inside him, something he didn't know how to describe. And then, in a last unexpected gesture, the cub turned its head back. His eyes met Peter's for a moment. He didn't make a sound, didn't come any closer, just looked. And then he turned again and disappeared into the trees beside his mother. Peter closed his eyes for a moment. He knew he would never see him again. But somehow I knew that look meant something. A silent thank you. And there, standing in the morning chill, he smiled. Some stories don't need words to be understood. If this story touched your heart, comment here. The cub found its mother, and share so that more people know about this incredible ending. Peter. He remained still for a long time, his eyes fixed on the spot where the bear cub had disappeared with his mother. The cold wind blew across the clearing, but he barely felt it. What had just happened seemed surreal. That little bear, who had arrived at her door shivering from the cold and lost in the world, was now next to her mother, exactly where she should be. He never imagined he would experience something like this. During all the years he chose to live isolated in the forest, he saw many animals cross his path. Some just passed by, others watched from afar, and some even approached out of pure curiosity. But never in his entire life had he witnessed something as powerful as that connection between such different species. Because after all, what really made that puppy follow a dog? What made Nanook accept him, protect him, lead him home without hesitation? And above all, what made that little bear trust a human? The answer wasn't simple, but Peter knew it had something to do with instinct, that invisible but powerful force that governs all living beings and drives them towards survival. The cub somehow knew that following that cub was his only chance. Nanook, on the other hand, recognized in that little being the same vulnerability that one day perhaps he felt when he was still just a puppy, before finding a home. And Peter, well, Peter was the final piece in this unlikely story of compassion and trust. And there he was, standing in front of the immensity of the forest, feeling a mix of emptiness and fullness at the same time. He should have just felt relieved that he had done the right thing, but somehow it wasn't just that. It was something bigger, something deeper. Peter realized that, as much as he believed he had chosen a solitary life, nature never allowed us to be truly alone. Because even in the vastness of Alaska, even in the relentless cold and absolute solitude, there would always be unexpected encounters, unlikely connections, and stories that defied all logic. He bent down and put his hand on Nanook's head, who was looking in the same direction, as if he was still processing everything that happened. The dog closed its eyes for a moment, accepting its owner's affection. He also felt that something extraordinary had just happened. In the end, isn't it amazing how animals can teach us so much about empathy, trust, and companionship? Because in the end, no matter the species, it doesn't matter if it's a human, a dog, or a bear. What really matters are the ties that connect us, even when everything seems unlikely. And that day, in that silent forest, one thing became very clear to Peter. Instinct may guide animals to survival, but it is compassion that makes us truly alive. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments, "Nature never leaves anyone alone," and share so that more people can feel this emotion. If this moving story touched you and made you believe even more in the power of instincts and unexpected connections, don't leave without subscribing to the channel. Here, you will always find incredible stories of overcoming impressive rescues and unforgettable moments between humans and animals. Click the subscribe button now and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories that will surprise you. And if you've made it this far, it means this journey has affected you. So I want to know, what did you feel when you saw this puppy reuniting with its mother? Comment below. Instinct never fails, to show that you followed this story to the end. It is clear, if this video moved you, leave a like. This helps bring this story to more people and motivates us to continue bringing you incredible content. Now, if you thought this ending was amazing, prepare, because the next story will leave you even more impressed. Have you ever imagined a bear that came back years later to find the person who saved it? Click on the video that appears on the screen and discover this unbelievable outcome.